Hey folks, welcome to Narratives. Narratives is a podcast exploring the ways in which the world is better than in the past, the ways it is worse, and the paths towards a better, more definite vision of the future. I'm your host, Will Jarvis, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoy it. You can find show notes, transcripts, and videos at narrativespodcast.com. Thank you, Zoom.
Wait, so
go ahead.
A few more questions.
Yeah.
So, and you prefer this video, I suppose, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah. So what we generally do, I like video because I like to put them up on YouTube. But if you don't want your video up, I just put up the audio on YouTube. It's not a problem at all. So either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
Got it. I think I should be fine with video, I suppose. Yeah, no problem. In terms of the content, I did want to say the stuff that I'm not. Yeah, I guess I'm not sure I'm able to talk too much in detail about my employer. So that's like one thing.
Yeah, sure. We'll keep it.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't necessarily am able to talk to.
Definitely. Cool. Yeah. And if anything's like, you're like, man, you think about it, later, you're like, yeah, I don't want that out there. Just let me know and we'll
get
rid of it. Cool. Awesome. Well, Abhay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Sneaked out of work a little bit early today to do this podcast, and yeah, excited to be on the show.
That's awesome. Do you mind giving just kind of a brief bio and some of the big ideas you're interested in?
A little bit about myself is I work at this company called Enduro Industries, which is builds software and hardware products for use in defense. Been working here for 2 years and 8 months. Currently work on the platform infrastructure team, working on a variety of different things, mostly on our platform, which is, we call it the Lattice AI platform. That is this platform for defense. And before that, I was on our autonomy program. I built one of our early autonomy systems. And before that, I was on the perception side, working directly under the CEO as an early employee. And before that, I was in college studying AI research. And yeah, that's been like a little bit of my current, most recent background. And I was also the president of our AI club in the university that we built from scratch. So that was fun.
Super cool. Super cool. And, why spend your time on defense? What about it is appealing to you in particular?
So, yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how much I'm able to talk about this topic.
Yeah,
it's a little bit related to my employer, but the way I ended up at my current job was mostly around, I was looking for a fast growing company. And I thought Enduro is one of the most, is going to be like a fast growing company given their background. It had,
gotcha.
Director of engineering from Palantir, which is Brian, founders partner Trey, and co-founder, CEO of Oculus, Palmer, who had already sold a $2 billion company to Facebook. And just having that all-star lineup, and as well as Matt and Joe, who are the other founders, who were also successful from Oculus and Palantir in the past. So just like an all-star founding team like that was kind of a stars aligning moment that it was hard for me to not see how this would succeed. So that was the reason I ended up joining.
Nice. So it's something like, this is a rocket ship. I see I've got an opportunity here. This is worth pursuing. Not like, okay, this, defense is a big problem. Like I want to apply my talents to, if that makes sense. Kind of came after the fact.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more along those lines.
Cool. That's super cool. I want to talk about robotics a little bit. We had this like promise. If you look at science fiction in the 40s and 50s, and you think about the Jetsons, and you think about robot assistants around everywhere, and that really has not panned out, right? I mean, I've got a Roomba sitting beside me, but that's about the extent of how far we've gotten. Are there hard technical challenges around perception that just make what is the big stumbling block from where we are now to getting to the point where we've got really robust, and I may not be defining this well, but um, people that can help us, like, fold laundry, or like robots that can help us fold laundry, or just like household chores, industrial capability. Where do you see the big places that need innovation to get there?
Definitely. As a kid as well, I grew up watching these shows. I would watch Jetsons, and that's probably the first way you get introduced to robotics is a humanoid robot who's like friendly and
Right.
helps you out and so forth. And then as I studied computer science and studied artificial intelligence, uh, this almost was, the opposite of the reality where these kinds of technologies are in fact a lot harder than building, let's say, some sort of a pure virtual assistant that
Right.
like Siri is a lot easier than building someone who will clean your room.
Right.
And it's not apparent at first, like why would that be the case? Like Siri can answer any questions about the world because it
Yeah.
accesses search engines. Why is that necessarily easier than being able to clean my room or something or make me food? It's not obvious, but what we have realized is that we have really good systems for information processing, collecting the world's data, organizing it, and so forth. But we don't have very good systems for perception, collecting real world data, understanding the real world. And what I've realized over time is that the systems necessary to build these kinds of uh, algorithms in the real world, the infrastructure is not really there. We're really far away from being able to build general purpose robotics that actually operate in the real world. The closest we have gotten to general purpose robotics is recently is again in the domain of picking, where you will pick like objects in
Gotcha.
a line, and it will be general purpose in the sense that you can pick different kinds of objects. But that's
Gotcha.
the extent to which general purpose robotics has gotten. And yeah, it's I would diagnose it as a systems problem at the end of the day, but obviously people will probably differ on that.
Interesting. And when you think about it as a systems problem, is that just like connecting all these disparate technologies you need? Like, so I can think of, let's say you want to pick a strawberry. Well, you've got to identify what a strawberry is,
Yeah.
and then you can't, you've got to have some way of determining how hard you're going to press on it when you pull it off. Because if you press too hard, it's going to explode. There's many challenges here. How do you
Mhm.
navigate in space? Yeah. So I guess what do you mean by a systems like system problem there? Is it just connecting
Right.
everything up in a robust way?
So certainly that is one aspect is wiring things together and getting all those things going. But the other aspect of this is I like so I think there's this quote from Isaac Newton where he says that if I've seen farther, it is by standing on the shoulder of giants. And that's like he was speaking from a scientific perspective when he's looking to invent new things and well, discover new things in the scientific domain. Technological domain is a similar kind of idea where every sort of great leap in technological progress is made possible by infrastructure or systems.
Gotcha.
And let me give you an example for that. When we think about Google, right? It's how was Google even possible? It was possible because you had this thing called the internet, which is this ubiquitous technology that we don't even think about. I think Alan Kay has a line on this, which is when was the last time you saw a technology that this technology doesn't even feel like a technology, almost feels like a natural resource. It feels like the ocean that you can ship bytes onto and it will just work. So these kinds of when we think about okay, what enables these really powerful applications, it's those like hidden layers of systems that are built
Nice.
up. And when we transpose this to robotics, it's similar. Like, do we have the hardware? Do we have the sensing systems? Do we have the perception systems? Do we have the some sort of like I don't know, like uh, development tools? The robotics development ecosystem is far worse than the cloud software development ecosystem. So when you add up all those things, it manifests in a difference that is not just like a 10x difference, but it's like 1,000 or multiple
Gotcha.
orders of magnitudes difference in quality output, I guess. Um, so that's one way to formulate that. Not sure how much that makes sense,
No,
but
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It also seems like it's probably like a part of it seems to be kind of a capital problem. It's just so much more expensive to do things like in the real world. Like,
Yeah.
when you're dealing with robots, it's much easier than like, zero marginal cost software, right? Like, I don't
Right.
know. Uh, do you see things changing now that capital is so easily available? Do you think it's possible that we'll see more innovation in the robotic space just because, I don't know, like,
I go back and forth on that. Ideally, so the way the idea around quantitative easing is that when you increase the amount of credit in the economy, it leads to either one of two things. One, it leads to productivity increases, or it leads to inflation.
that's
To
right.
get the productivity increase, you need spare capacity in the ecosystem, which basically means that something along the lines of engineers ready to build stuff, and they're not building stuff because they don't have money. And if that is true, then it will lead to
That'll start working.
productivity
Yeah.
increases because you have spare capacity. But if that's not true, you see like weird phenomena. And
Right.
what seems to be happening to me is you're not actually seeing people going out and building stuff with
More weird
increased credit.
phenomenon.
You're seeing weird phenomena on the internet where you're seeing like I don't know, like NFTs or something and crazy stuff like
Right.
that. Like the meme economy is getting created instead.
Yeah.
So what we wanted was, people building robots and buildings and monuments and so forth. But
Yeah.
what we got was the meme economy, and everything is more fake than ever. So
Right.
that's what I see is happening. The question maybe is better framed as we don't need more credit. What we need is spare capacity, and then yeah, how do you sort of uh, arrange things in a way that has spare capacity to build stuff in the real world or something?
Right, right. Yeah, it's a real problem. And you make a great point. It does seem like things are just getting even more virtual. There's this whole
Right.
discourse around like whatever the hell Web3 is. I'm not sure, but it's something, right? Everyone's like just leaning in there to. This is very interesting. How do you? This is a tough problem, and I don't expect you to have an answer to it, but how do you encourage people to actually work on real problems in the real world? Yesterday we talked to Carlos from Quays, who's doing millimeter wave drilling for geothermal energy, which is
Mm-hmm.
really like cool technology. It's very difficult, but if he pulls it off, it's like this is a very important thing to be doing. Uh,
Absolutely.
is it just like you started an AI club? Is it just talking to young people, telling that it is possible to solve some of these problems that we have in the world? What do you think about that? Like what should we try and do as individuals to help?
It's a good question, and it's a weird one because it's funny because when you look at the decisions people have, where will they spend their time on? It's like you can make $10 million in 3 months working on crypto, or
Yes.
you can spend 10 years on improving other people's lives. I mean, I'm not,
Right.
that's like, yeah, I'm not saying that crypto is bad in every sense, but I'm
Right.
saying that the way things are set up right now is that the incentives are to work on the virtual thing, which is to be fair, it's like not been the case necessarily just for crypto. It's been the case for software more
More
generally
generally.
for like the last 20, 30 years. So it's just been way easier to build stuff in the software. So I think there was a point someone brought up on this was, I think it was a Sam Altman actually, where it's like, okay, if it's not that we should ban crypto, what we should do instead is make the real world stuff easier. And then that's like, it's a definitely a long debate. And I think there's many ways to do it. And one of the ways is just making that cool again. And I think
Right.
people have been working on this. And it is pretty cool actually. Like when you tell people about your crazy geothermal mining project,
Right.
it's
Exactly.
cool, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's
it
awesome.
sounds cool. I think it is in. And then what we need to see is a series of successes that make this likely thing to be doing, and that can maybe, yeah,
It,
reorient.
it, yeah, and it does seem like the success aspect is really important, right? Like people need to have something they can kind of
Yeah,
like look up to or like desire, and that's if they don't really have that kind of model, it's in trouble. It's like how do you get there? Really difficult.
absolutely.
Kind of success begets success. That's super interesting. Glenn, do you have a question?
Yeah. So as an AI guy, um, I've had this I've come across this idea that for things like vision systems and general purpose AIs, what you might need is, in a sense, a body or a way for the AI to navigate the world. And this is from the idea that as animals, and specifically as people with really advanced consciousnesses, we think of things in terms of what we can do with them. So we think of pens as things we can pick up, and then things on the size of way too big to pick up, we think how we can get around them. Like we look at a mountain and we think I can walk up that.
Yes.
What's your opinion on that?
I think I've read an argument from this. I can't remember, but this is something along the lines of, I think someone basically used something like this argument where since the AI is not in the world, and then it's not, since the AI is not part of the world, this is like a philosophical argument. It's called being in the world. It's not in the world in the sense of that you just described, where it cannot interact with the world. It cannot actually attain intelligence the same way humans do. Therefore, it proves that artificial general intelligence is not possible. So something along those lines. It's a pretty interesting paper. I can't remember who wrote that. It's a pretty famous one as well. I think is it Herbert Dreyfus? I think it might be, yeah, Herbert Dreyfus, if I'm getting that right, or someone related to that person. But it's an interesting idea, and it's always an open question of, can you actually get intelligence? There's intelligence as being substitutive of humans, and then there is intelligence that is of a different kind, almost like of a supernatural, maybe not supernatural nature or something. And I don't know how you get intelligence that is substitutive of humans in the sense that you described. Like, how do we get an AI to move around the world? Even if you get the perception systems sophisticated enough, even then it's like unclear. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Where maybe there's like a limit you hit where the perception systems get so good, they meet the resolution of the eye and nose and so forth, and then you put all of those together in a mechanical body, and then it's an agent, so it's able to learn by moving around the world. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. That's one kind of intelligence, and then there's the other kind of intelligence that's not in the world, in the formal sense, where it's in this virtual world, it's in the internet or something, and then it operates purely on language. This is more closer to the current foundation models we're looking at, like GPT-3 and BERT and so forth, that are imitating intelligence purely by operating on language. And that is a different kind of intelligence than the intelligence that is in the world, that is interacting with the world, the physical world at least. And those can be separate intelligences with different kinds of powers. And maybe we'll have, I'm getting speculative here a little bit, but maybe those two kinds of intelligences have different growth trajectories, where the GPT-20 or something is very good at knowledge work and so forth, whereas the Jetson bot that is in the world is able to maybe interact as an agent with the physical world and learn interesting things there. But there's like pretty hard challenges on the real world side, because the way we have done agent learning is using a large set of episodes in terms of, like, when you're training a game or agents in a game to play the game, you have to like run billions of simulations. So you can't do that with the real world robot. So that's one challenge. But otherwise, maybe they will trend to different kinds of intelligences. And there's not necessarily like one super powerful intelligence, if that makes sense.
Right. Have you heard of Psych? It's a company who's trying to like hard code almost heuristics in language. And it's really interesting because they're trying to get a jumping off point for general intelligences to understand things like, it's really hard to explain, but like if you say Glenn died, and then in the next sentence you say Glenn was walking around the mall, you assume that like they're talking about different times because of your general heuristic of, dead people don't walk around malls or something like that, or dead people can't walk.
Is the idea that you're going to build a heuristic database of some kind and prime the general learner from that?
Yes. And they had written this they had come up with this like type of coding language where
Mm-hmm.
you could like, you know, explicitly state these heuristics.
Sure.
And I listened to a podcast about it. It was from Lex Friedman, but I forget the guy's name, and I don't even know how to spell psych. So I
Yeah.
don't know if this helps a lot.
Uh-oh. Is this recent? Well, I guess it's Lex Friedman, so I'm sure it's like fairly recent. Um,
Um, well, the guy's been doing this for something like 30 years, I think he
oh, okay.
said.
Okay. That makes a lot.
So, and the the way he started it was he was asking his friends or colleagues or whatever, you know, if you could distill all of the common sense into a number of ideas that people have learned,
Mhm.
like how many could there be? You know, and
Mhm.
everybody kind of came up with like probably around 100 million, maybe. And so, how long would it take for a number of coders to using a language
Right.
explicitly write them down in a database?
Hey, that's an interesting point. Well, what number has he gotten to? Do you happen to know? Or
They said it in the podcast. I don't know. I go through
Okay.
Lex Friedman stuff.
oh, okay.
I think it was Younger. I think his name was Younger, something Younger, and his company
Oh,
was Psych.
right. I guess how many like so you said it there's only 100 million core ideas or something, and how many ideas does he have so far?
I think he had gotten to something like 70,000 or maybe 700,000.
Okay,
Like
that's
So
quite a
way
ways
not
to
off.
go.
very far.
Quite a way off.
Yeah, not super far. And he's been going for 30 years. But
Wow,
he's
that's
right.
that's
And
a,
Brutal.
a high motivation person, I guess.
yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Well, this reminds me of, hey, you know, how concerned are you about like AI safety? We've talked to quite a few people that work on the field in the on the podcast. Um, I'm almost more worried that we never get to general AGI, you know, AGI. Um, but yeah, how concerned are you, and what do you think should be done about it?
So I'm concerned about. So the AGI question is always a question mark, and there are people who have been, raising their alarms about it. Um, like there's famous figures about that. The shorter term concern is actually more around what I would say data privacy and data regulation, which is who controls like the data sets. That's one setup, and then the other one is more on like compute governance, who controls the compute. Because what we are seeing right now is that the powerful intelligences that are getting built require heavy compute. It's a compute intensive.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's like data intensive anymore. It's almost like a compute intensive. So whoever has is the big clusters are going to yield outsized returns and so forth. So that is a weird setup, I think, mostly because when I think about AI, it's kind of a public good invention in the sense that it's like a scientific discovery. If you
Yeah.
discover intelligence, the public good discovery, it's like patenting E equals MC square or some fundamental law of the universe. Like that, those are the kinds of things you're discovering. But what we're seeing in practice is that it's the big tech companies that have the capital and resources to build these things. So that is how I would frame that whole debate, at least in my head. I mean, I'm sure other people have other opinions, but that's my main thought. There is uh, who controls the compute. It's
Gotcha.
like
It's just a resourcing problem, and there's only a few people that really have the capability to make that happen.
yes, and then they will make it happen for their own benefit, I suppose,
Right.
and not for the benefit of some greater good. So that is the situation right now we're in.
I think it's a good way to think about it, and one should perhaps
Yeah,
go buy some Fang stock if you buy.
yeah. I
You
mean,
know?
people have been doing well on that, and it's going to be interesting how that develops.
Yeah. Is it your feeling that well, I have the feeling that the big tech companies have gotten fairly sclerotic. Yeah, what's your feeling on that? We've talked to someone from Facebook's AI research lab, and he works on robotics as well, actually, doing some pretty interesting things. But outside of like some few small pockets, it seems to be just like sit on the giant, money printing press of ad revenue and
Mhm.
ride that out until, just fight internal political battles until it explodes or something. I don't know. What's your feeling on that?
Not sure it's uniform at these companies. There are certainly ways to retire early by working at one of these companies.
Right.
Like I'm sure there's like many positions you can join right out of as a college graduate at a big tech company where it's like an early retirement package where you graduate and now you're done or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's possible. But at the same time, it's also the case that all the top AI researchers are in some sense working with these companies, either Facebook or Google or OpenAI, which is now kind of like, funded by Microsoft. And it seems to be the case that they both they do have the best AI talent. So this is speaking from outsider perspective. I did intern at Facebook, but that's been a while, and that's my view at least.
Makes sense. I want to shift a little bit, and we can definitely cut this part. But Girard, how did you first get introduced to Girard, and to you, what makes Girard really interesting? Like what aspect is it? Like understanding desire? Is it the kind of understanding of myth and violence? Like what is really interesting to you?
The way I got introduced to it was I was really interested in understanding anthropology, or studying human nature and what that means, and came across I think Girard styles himself as a cultural anthropologist, and he has this theory of human nature, at least that is sort of revealed through these certain texts, and I guess that is the aspect that is interesting to me, which is he has this theory of human nature. And it's like it's one model of viewing people as kind of like mimetic objects, and and it's I guess from an AI perspective not that crazy because you're sort of like imitative learning, so forth, right? And that it's an interesting model and an interesting way of analyzing human behavior, and that is sort of my exposure there at least.
Definitely. I don't know about you, but did you have a moment, after you started reading Girard, where you look at your own desires and you're like, wow, like, man, like I need to really sit down and think about this more.
Absolutely. So there's probably been at least so he has this one aspect of his theory is like the triangular structure of desire. And that one really hit me hard, at least when I was analyzing my own sort of relationships and so forth. It's like it's too real, and it's like, wow, this is way too real, and that has been pretty powerful, at least. And I'm surprised people haven't discovered this already. It's kind of embedded in literature, it's embedded in Shakespeare and so forth. But I'm surprised nobody just said this theory. I'm sure some people have, but it's a really powerful model that it sounds almost too stupid to be true,
Right. It does. It almost seems simplistic until you start thinking about it. You're like, oh man, like it drives quite a lot. I'm in the middle of reading Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky. Excuse my pronunciation there. And it's incredible how ingrained all these ideas are around, he's talking about how we used to scapegoat people, and now like we can't, like when we do that, we know it's wrong, and isn't it worse to do it if you know it's wrong? And like the main character it's quite impressive, and I can see how Girard pulled a lot of his ideas out of that. Have you gathered how much do you buy about the specialness of Christianity, and how Girard paints it as being like the first, like the Christian myth, the story of Jesus being innocent, being the first kind of scapegoat that's kind of proclaimed to be innocent in myth. I don't know if I'm saying this very well, but yeah, do you think this? Do you buy that? Do you think this is a true statement?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Let me think.
Take the time.
One thing I would say here is that I think I'm not sure Girard, I don't know where he comes off on this. So in his own text, he has mentioned that it's not, while he definitely maintains that this is the way he describes it is like this is revelatory mechanism in Christianity. I'm not sure he thinks it's unique. And he has pointed to other counterexamples, like, for example, there's a Hindu tradition, and he's not an expert in Sanskrit, but he believes he has talked to Sanskrit authors, and he believes a similar mechanism is present in other religions. So I don't even know where he comes off on that. His own background is Christianity, so it's understandable why he has focused on that. So it is entirely possible. It seems like an underrated phase of research right now, at least in the way Girard describes this was, or I don't know if it's just Girard, but the line I've heard on this is like, religion is bad cosmology, good on anthropology, meaning that these texts have anthropology embedded in them, and they're all worth understanding and studying for that reason. And there's this whole notion of, I don't know if you've heard this, there's like the axial age, and there's all these like ages in time or knowledge where it's almost like human history is evolving through language, or our understanding of consciousness evolving. And during the axial age, there was like one period of time in human history where all of these religions were born. It's kind of like a Cambrian explosion, but in religion.
Yeah.
And after that, you don't see any more religions being born. So it's kind of like this evolving consciousness of our language. And that way you can see, I think in the same period of time, there's Christianity, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and a few other religions being formed. So it's like very much like this evolution in consciousness, which is an interesting way to think about it.
Oh, that's super interesting. Maybe it's just like all these things came together. It was just the right time for, this kind of like thing for us to discover. And then kind of like the Julian Jaynes, like origin of consciousness thing.
Right.
That's very interesting. It's very interesting. Which one of Girard's works impressed you the most?
So that's a tough one. I think I really like this one called When These Things Begin. The reason I like that one is the setup is basically like the author attacking him with questions like, but why not this? But why not this? And so forth. And he just like destroys him on each line. Yeah, which I really love. So it's a pretty interesting setup. And at least in the defense of the questioner, the questioner does ask like the main objections people usually have to Girard's theory, and he answers them depending on your interpretation. I thought it was fairly, in a fairly agreeable manner. And there were some very wild thoughts he had. That text not only goes over like the usual like anthropology, philosophy, religion questions, but it also goes over like science questions. So like Girard has theories on like why we have had this whole exploration in almost like there's this pattern in like physics where people are like, okay, we're gonna open up parts, like we discover the atom, and then we have subatomic particles, and then we have strings, and then just keep trying to go down. And then somehow Girard believes that this is almost like a dead end in a way, or we're just going to keep on finding another layer. And it's how he has views on these things, which is not necessarily directly attached to his main theory. So that's one of the interesting tidbits.
Oh, that's super interesting. What was that text again? Was it When It Begins?
When These Things Begin.
When These Things Begin. That's super interesting. I'm going to look back at
the name as well. Yeah.
Super interesting. What has it been like? I'm assuming you've got, you're a great engineer, got a hard engineering background. How is it like coming to like look at human nature, cultural anthropology through that lens?
Mm-hmm.
And has that informed anything? And perhaps, do you think that made Girard a bit appealing in that it's systematizing in some sense of human nature?
Yes, that is definitely one aspect that so this is one of the critiques of Girard. Like Girard believes that there's an aversion in the humanities or social sciences to systematizing.
Right.
And they were the structuralists, like Claude Lévi-Strauss and so forth, who did have some systematization, but more of the modern turn has been against systematization and more around, like avoiding that. And there's, I think, a long intellectual history reason for why that is. But that is definitely true in the humanities and social sciences. There's an aversion to systematization. And as a computer scientist, that is something that I'm naturally inclined towards, is understanding, patterns, all kinds of patterns. You see similar patterns in like software engineering. We're thinking about how to structure an organization, and the code you debug is a function of that organization. So thinking of all these in a systems perspective is one thing that really interests me in not just Girard, but there's like other thinkers who have this approach, a systematic approach to thinking about human nature.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one resonance with me.
Definitely. And who are some of those thinkers? Like what would you recommend?
Well, the classical thinkers like Aristotle and so forth, these people had a similar approach to understanding things. They brought down nature from the heavens. So for the first time, they were thinking about human nature not as something that is like almost like a celestial object, and more as a thing you can observe and understand and build a theory from that. So the whole like scientific tradition is in a way born out of that. So there's a lot there actually. If you just read the classical text of Aristotle, like he's systematizing, and I think it was his idea really, which is like humans are the most imitative of all creatures. That was not Girard's idea, that was Aristotle's idea. So, or he came up with it before Girard, maybe he stole it from someone else, I don't know. So the classical thinkers are a really good source in that sense. And if for some reason people don't go to the direct sources, but there's actually a lot there. And in a weird way, we haven't necessarily moved too much far from that,
right?
Which is really bizarre, I think.
Definitely. It's quite bizarre. I'm curious. Are you down for a quick round of overrated or underrated?
Sure.
Just let term out. Okay.
Okay.
So the first one, Boston Dynamics, overrated or underrated, or correctly rated? I don't know.
Underrated as a marketing firm, overrated as a engineering company.
Oh, really?
Well, it's really a marketing company at the moment.
It's like, primarily right.
People see the wild videos on YouTube where their brains explode, and they've been around for like 2 decades, and they've been like shuffled, like just like they get acquired from one company and the other, and
gotcha.
They're really good marketing. I mean, I love them. I don't know what can you do with them? Like, can you actually use them? I don't know.
Right. So it's kind of searching for an application, but hasn't quite
for 20 years. I mean, that's
for 20 years.
At some point so you stop being like a consumer or product market fit oriented company and something else, I guess. Yeah.
Negative interest rates, overrated or underrated?
So on the one hand, everybody is like always screaming about those things.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there is visibly high inflation and low productivity. So maybe appropriately rated, because it's something everybody knows is a problem. Nobody's doing anything about it. So it just is, I guess.
Keeps going.
Keeps going.
Right. Political polarization in the U.S. Is that overrated or underrated right now?
So probably appropriately rated. I mean, people seem to characterize it in a fair manner, and I think there's no like alpha available there in terms of
right. It's too many people looking at it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Definitely. GPT-3, overrated or underrated?
I would say currently, it's actually, this is a tough one. I think it's definitely underrated. I think people are underestimating the extent to which language models can be the next computing platform. So I think if not GPT-3, the GPT-20 is going to be like, I don't even know, absurdly good. Like it's going to be wild.
Like really
Yeah.
scary. Do you
Yeah.
think it just ends up replacing most knowledge workers kind of in the US?
I don't know about that. It will definitely like change the character of the knowledge work by a lot. So if it continues the general trend of automation where you have automation, then that's like it changes the character of work, and then you just the time spent is like on different things. So you're no longer shuffling papers and stapling, forms.
Yeah.
You're doing something else, filling out email or something. So it definitely will shift the way knowledge workers spend their time. I don't know, it cannot replace a human because it will lack intentionality. By that I mean you can't, the OpenAI will not operate in the world, the GPT-3 won't operate in the world, it's not in the world, and it won't be able to, it won't have agency. So
Somebody's got to drive that.
I'm sorry?
Someone's got to drive that like direction.
Yeah, someone will have to drive it. Yeah, it'll be more of a car in that sense. So someone has to be the driver, and I think that so it will be that's how I would predict it will going in the short term at least.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Abhay, thank you so much for taking the time. I've learned a ton. I really appreciate you coming on. Where should we send people? Do you have a personal site or something that you'd like people to check out?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a personal website. It's just abhayvenkatesh.com, ABHAYVENKATESH.com. Yeah, feel free to check it out.
Awesome. We'll link to it. Thanks, Abhay.
Absolutely. Thanks, Will. Bye.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Narratives.